Hello, welcome to week 7, where we're going to be looking at all the different types of maps that you might want to use for community history. So the first type of map that you might want to look at are tithe maps. Now tithe maps are a bit like land tax registers, in which they record visually the different types of plots of landowners and tenants who have to pay the tithe. Used to be a church tax. You'd pay 10% to the church, and then it becomes integrated after the Reformation into more of a kind of land tax. In a lot of areas, tithes are what's called commuted, i.e. the people don't have to pay them anymore. But we still have quite a lot of areas that draw up these maps and plans of the different landowners and different tenants that do have to pay the tithe. And so, for example, Cheshire County Council have put all their historic maps online. It's great, and you can go through the index online so you can find out which plot of land belonged to which person and who occupied it. Most of them are very agricultural, so we're looking at non-urban areas, but that's still useful. So in this example we can see that Mary Barlow owns that plot of land somewhere within the parish of Stockport in Cheshire, and that the occupier is an Amy Kershaw, and that it's a pasture land. It gives you the area as well, and it's from 1841. So it might be useful if you're looking up the plot of land and land ownership and tenants. Another type of map is an estate plan, so drawn up by big landowners who want to track the amount of land they've got and who their tenants are. And so obviously this is based on private estates, and often you'll find them in record offices in the estate records of aristocratic landowners. Another type of map that becomes more useful if you're looking at urban areas are town plans. So the first detailed town plans arrive in the 18th century in Britain. One of the most famous ones is John Rock's map of London from 1746. And if you go on the Locating London site, you can look at it interactively and really zoom in on places you want in London. It's fantastically detailed. And obviously also Locating London is a big project to put different forms of data on that map, to do with crime, to do with landowning, to do with all sorts of things. So do have a look at that site. But we also have panoramas, which are meant to be sold a bit more aesthetically. And again, remember that the detail of maps is often an interpretation. It's an artistic impression. So particularly with panoramas, they're meant to look aesthetically pleasing as well. So they might not be completely accurate, but they give you a view of the whole landscape. Street directories are also a really good source of mapping. So the equivalent of the Yellow Pages or whatever it is now, back in the day it was street directories which tell you which businesses are where, and they often come with a map to show you where the businesses are. So very good if you're looking at commercial history, and they come in a quite easy to follow format. They've often got a key with the key sites in the area, so they could also be used as tourist maps as well. The key turning point in British history in terms of mapping is the Ordnance Survey. And the Royal Ordnance, part of the military, decides to map firstly the south coast of England during the Napoleonic Wars to make sure that they can work out which are the areas that the army can get to and the navy can defend under the threat of Napoleon. But that quickly spreads out to a huge mapping project by the Ordnance Survey of the whole of Britain. And these are the most accurate maps to date. From the 1830s, 1840s, you get most of Britain mapped, and they're done through triangulation. They're a lot more accurate than previous maps. And some of them are very small scale, so you can zoom in right to which areas you want to look at in great detail, such as these maps of London, where they even specified what the buildings are. So really, really useful. And I recommend you use the National Library of Scotland site to zoom in and look at these maps in detail. There's other types of maps for different purposes. So whereas the Ordnance Survey maps are meant to be accurate representations of the street plans and the whole of the country, we also have different types of maps thought up by Victorians who are obsessed with trying to count things and trying to use statistics to solve social problems. And Charles Booth's maps are perhaps the most famous of those. He mapped London and used his own colour coding scheme to work out areas of poverty and areas of rich residents throughout London. And again, the technology's increased greatly in terms of online mapping. So the LSE have got a brilliant site where you can explore these areas, compare them with modern day maps. But again, it's subjective. If you look at the categories that Charles Booth used to colour code the areas, they're very Victorian in their attitudes to class and to poverty. So again, you've always got to see maps as subjective, as reflective of the views of the people of the time. Even ones that look fairly geographically accurate have got things that are pointed out that the author of the maps wants to emphasise, and also missing out things that they don't think are important. Insurance plans are a final type of map. They're quite good, again, for if you're doing the history of business, and the gold maps of the turn of the century are the most useful. And again, they should have keys telling you which buildings belong to who, which buildings are commercial buildings, which ones are industrial buildings. So I've just picked one from Chelmsford in Essex. Random, you can see how detailed they are. They even give street numbers, which is hugely useful as well if you're comparing this with the census. So remember that in this module I'm going to be emphasising record linkage, that you can link different types of sources together to provide a fuller picture. So you could link this with the street directory of the time. You could also look at the 1901 census and match up the people in the census with the individual buildings. And the British Library have put most of them online on that link there, so do go and have a look at those too.